action on, I think it's the Act 1 index. So that is basically a vote that, the board takes to make a determination as to whether or not we'll either stay within the Act 1 index or will exceed the Act 1 index. So we have a presentation on that so that we're prepared for that discussion.
Do you want me to take that, or do you want?
You can, yeah, if you
Okay.
want to, you feel that, feel free to.
Yeah, Jason and I met, we're actually going to do a presentation on where we stand to date at the committee of the whole. I also thought it would be proper to actually go over what the board gets every month, that they're approving the treasurer's report, which shows the budget figures every single month. I'm going to put that up so the public can actually see what you're seeing. And we'll also talk about the Act 1 index and have a vote on it for the regular voting meeting at that in January. But that is going to be on the agenda. That's what we agreed to, correct? Okay.
That is correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Policy Committee, Dr. Hemberger.
Thanks, Dr. Herring. It's recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the three policies on the agenda for first reading and the three policies for second reading.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. New business, the Health and Safety Plan. Discussion and possible revision to the Health and Safety Plan. Does anybody have any comments or anything they'd like to talk about with that, or any questions?
I have a question. Is there a meeting of the Pandemic Task Force scheduled anytime soon?
No, there's not.
I think if we're going, are we going to vote on this at some point, or could we hear a little bit about what has to happen before the administration would take some action, and what kind of action would the administration contemplate taking that would need board approval as far as the rising numbers go?
So just to give like a brief history of the progression of the health and safety plan, all the way back in July of 2020, we had to develop a health and safety plan in order to move forward with the school year that had to be submitted to the state. Part of that health and safety plan was repeatedly an instructional time template that allowed schools to have fully virtual instruction as well as hybrid in order to meet their 180 days, 990 hours requirement through PDE. So the board had several different occasions where the elements of the plan were presented, as well as that instructional time template. This year, the number of mandates that have come from the governor, or more correctly, the Secretary of Health, has been limited down to what had been the mask mandate that was lifted by the courts. And then there continues to be an ongoing mandate that is the case for all communicable diseases, which is that someone who has a Department of Health recognized communicable diseases needs to exclude themselves from school. So in this case, someone who has COVID-19 actively cannot attend school. But there are no more mandates on quarantine. There's no more mandates on masks, et cetera. So the existing health and safety plan that the district has, following the last board vote on the topic, changed the language to state that we would follow all of the mandates, because we wanted to be certain, and I appreciated the board having clarity on this, that we wouldn't break the law or go against what was an order from the Department of Health or the governor, but that we would not have in our plan repeatedly that we would follow all of the guidance or guidelines that would be issued by CDC or the Department of Health, et cetera. So right now, that is what our health and safety plan says, is that we would follow the mandates. There is no contemplation on the part of the administration at this point to recommend any changes to the health and safety plan. However, just at the time that we were talking about the changes to the health and safety plan, a part of the board discussion was the fact that the newly constituted board or the board at any time could reinstitute mandates as they saw fit. The it has been made very clear that school boards do have the authority to institute a mask mandate if they wish to do so. The school board could direct us to reinstitute quarantines if they wish to do so, et cetera. But at this point, there's no recommendation from the administration in terms of making any changes to the health and safety plan. That would be up to the discretion of the board, and then as the administrative team, we would implement whatever the board would decide.
Thank you, Dr. Miner.
welcome.
Just to follow up, what kinds of milestones, benchmarks, whatever you want to call them, signposts, are you looking at and will you look at as we see numbers going up nationally within Berks County? The test positivity rate is now up to 20% in Berks County, according to the New York Times dashboard. What kinds of numbers will you begin to be alarmed at or by as we continue through the winter?
As the superintendent of schools, you know, I'm very concerned that we, again, follow the laws and the regulations. I believe that we're about to get a new Secretary of Health, so that person may have a different opinion on what school districts need to do. So I am always keeping abreast of what's happening in terms of our requirements from PDE, the Department of Health, the governor, and Dr. Hackman and the BCIU has done a great job in being supportive of us doing that. From a strictly educational standpoint, you know, if we would have a situation where the Department of Health would say that we had some sort of an outbreak and we needed to close the building as a response to that, you know, that would be my job as a superintendent to certainly do that. In terms of benchmark numbers in the community broadly, to recommend any changes to the health and safety plan, I think that over the course of the pandemic, it's been made, I think, quite clear to superintendents that ultimately those changes are made by the Board of School Directors as the governing body in terms of if they want to assign them to benchmark case counts. Some districts are doing that. If they want to restrict it strictly to mandates, et cetera. So it really is, you know, at this point, the position of the administration that, you know, we'll carry out whatever the board believes is in the interest of the community as a whole and do our best to make sure that, you know, our students continue to receive an excellent education during that time. I think our nursing staff has been top-notch. You know, Dawn Harris and her team, in terms of, you know, complying with all of the orders, have done a great job. Right now in the schools, we see about 50% of students and staff wearing masks, 50% not. We haven't, I hadn't had any reports of any student-to-student bullying, any concerns regarding that. We haven't seen any spikes in the internal data in the school community that reflect necessarily those high numbers that you cite from the New York Times within Exeter or tied to any of the changes that we've made to the plan. So there's nothing that we see as an administrative team right now that would lead us to say that we feel like in the interest of the educational process of the school, there's a need to make a change. But if you look around the county, you know, boards have taken all kinds of different approaches, and they have really from the beginning. So, you know, one of the things Dr. Hackman says frequently is, you know, there's not right or wrong answers. You know, that's part of the job of governance, is to decide what is ultimately right for this particular community. And then, of course, it's our job to carry that out to the best of our ability.
Thank you, and you anticipated my next two questions, so thank you very much.
I'd like to make a comment, if I can, please. So, Dr. Miner mentioned it 50-50 with masks. I mean, the community is very divided in terms of pro-mask, anti-mask, what we should do in terms of schools. And that's even evident when you look at the school districts, the 18 school districts in the county. There's 3 districts that are requiring masks all the time. There's 8 districts that are requiring masks tied to transmission levels of COVID cases in school, and there's 7 districts that are completely optional, including ours. And I think my main concern this year was mainly making sure that vaccinations were available to those that wanted it and needed it to protect themselves. I do want to point out that 2 weeks ago, the Berks County Emergency Services Director, Brian Gottschall, did announce or make a public statement at the county commissioners meeting that warned about the strain to our local hospitals. And effectively, what we've done with ending the mask mandate on December 15th, or our own mandate, is we're effectively going against the recommendations by the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics. So I don't think it makes sense to try to enforce a mask mandate now, days before a winter break, but I think it would be prudent for the board to consider requiring masks January 3rd through January 14th after holidays in terms of a post-holiday surge.
Dr. Miner, have we seen an uptick in cases, positive reports from our students and families since we have lifted the mask mandate?
Not a discernible one, but I will let Mrs. Harris quote the exact figures for you.
Thank you, Dr. Miner. So let me just pull them up real quick. So our case count we go Saturday to Saturday. So from Saturday the 18th until today, late this afternoon, we got a few more. High school is at 3, junior high is at 0, Rifton at 3, Jackson Wald at 1, Lorraine at 2, Owatton Creek at 1.
And just to follow up on her question, Mrs. Harris, is that similar to previous weeks in terms of the numbers?
Right now, yes. We typically get a bulk of our cases Monday and Tuesday, then they trickle off throughout the rest of the week.
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thanks, Tim. My question was in regards to the numbers. What is the number? I mean, I realize that Antietam had to, close their doors, or they decided to do that. Is there a threshold that, depending on the size of our school, what is the threshold of cases that we have to shut it for 14 days?
So, do you want me to take it? Yeah. So there's no requirement for closure anymore. That was, last year there was the attestation order that required us to close based on a certain number of cases. Now, there's a certain threshold for DOH encouraging us to talk to them to kind of come up with some solutions, one of which could be a closure. And those numbers are for small schools, which right now are Jackson, Wald, and Lorraine, 25 cases within a 14-day window. For medium school, which for us would be Owatton, Rifton, and junior high, anything between 25 and 45 cases. And then large school, which is our high school, 45 plus cases.
And just to make sure that I understand, and anybody else who has this question, have we ever, within the 14-day period thus far, since we've been tracking cases, have we come anywhere close to this?
We had 1 week at Rifton, and I would have to look back on my chart, to 1 2-week period at Rifton where we came close to the 25.
And how?
The lower end of the threshold.
And how close was that?
I'd have to look back at the chart and get it for you. Just give me a second.
That's okay. Thank you, Ms. Harris.
Dr. Rattler, I would add, in terms of closure, that there are occasions where school districts have had to close because they've had inadequate staff. It's conceivable, for instance, if you had a lot of bus drivers that were out, or a large number of staff that you couldn't have substitutes for. So there have been occasions where schools have had to close simply because they didn't have adequate staff to cover, not because of a threshold. So that would be another possibility.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And that number was 23.
Mrs. Harris, when was that?
The week of October 30th, and then the following week of November 6th.
I just want to acknowledge the community and everybody that's reached out to the board, either in person or through email with your concerns. It's important that you know that we hear you. I take every one of those notes that I get and I read them, and I take that to heart. I think I could speak on the board when I say we're all concerned. This is a big deal. We're watching it very, very closely. Personally, I know it's only 7 days in, only 5 days of school. We haven't seen a major uptick from what we've seen in past weeks. But, personally, I'm going to continue to monitor it, ask the questions we need to ask. Dr. Miner and Mrs. Harris have been very good about getting us that information when we need it. And if we got to that point where there was the concern where we saw the growth in positives, it's something we definitely have to talk about, having another discussion about. But personally, right now, with us not seeing it, we have 2 days left of school before a break, and we can continue to monitor, maybe not in school positives, but what's going on in the community over the next week and a half while we're on break. And I always encourage every family to have those conversations and make the decision that you think is best for mitigation. And I'm glad to hear that families are doing that the schools are going on, and that we're not seeing any backlash from students or bullying or anything like that. So, but we're definitely watching it. Thank you.
In regards to Mr. Mel's suggestion, is that something that, how would we handle that? Is that something that we would put on a special vote at our next meeting, which would be the day after, I believe, what you're suggesting?
Yeah, my understanding is that could not be voted on tonight. Is that correct?
I would defer to Mrs. Montaigne.
You could make a motion because it was on the agenda. However, I think that in the past you've had a process where you use your health and safety committee. I'm not using the right term, but the pandemic task force.
Yeah, we have on occasion had the pandemic task force, but we've also had votes that were not in relation to that.
So you could make a motion this evening. Right now, you have not yet made a motion. If you made a motion, it would have to be seconded, and then the board could vote on that.
It's fine. I'm happy to make the motion, and we can see where it goes. I'd like to make a motion that we would amend the health and safety plan to state that we would require masking for all students and staff from January 3rd until January 14th of 2022.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, I have a question. I feel that we've gotten legal advice that are we able to legally enforce a mandate?
If you make it part of your health and safety plan, which is still a requirement for all school boards, then you can enforce that. This board can create that requirement for its own school district. Yes.
Question.
Sorry.
Question. What's the period again? January 3rd?
January 3rd through January 14th. It's the first 2 weeks returning back to school next year after winter break.
Okay. Well, what's the significance of a 2-week period? I don't quite understand.
It's post-holiday.
I think what he is implying is the fact that for 10 to 14 days post-exposure, you can be asymptomatic, but still transmit the disease. If I'm not correct, Jason, just
That's
let me
correct.
know.
You said
Thank
it
you.
way more eloquent than I could.
Okay, so I think that is why he has chosen those dates. And I was also going to ask, if I might, Ms. Montaigne, I realize there are a lot of, this community and the world is divided on this issue. And I realize that, yes, we can mandate it, can there be repercussions to the district? I mean, can we be held in court since this has gone? I mean, there is a case that did go to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. They said that the state could not mandate masks. I mean, could we be held responsible at any point?
The Supreme Court case actually ruled that they didn't follow the proper procedure with regard to creating a mask mandate, and that's why it was struck down. You know, anybody can sue anybody. But there is really virtually no liability other than the cost of dealing with a lawsuit if somebody were to file one. In terms of whether if you enforce something that is consistent with guidance that is currently out there, and again, it's guidance, it's not required, you face minimal risk in terms of following, you know, well-established public guidance. At the moment, I would also say conversely, because there is no more mandate, you also don't have a great deal of risk, although there are still lawsuits out there for students where school districts have adopted an optional or no mask policy, where parents are still suing districts saying that particular students at risk are then denied the ability to participate in public education. And those lawsuits are still out there. They're still pending. We don't know how they're going to play out.
Thank you.
You know, for me, this comes a little soon. We have 2 days left of school. We have 13 days until the break ends. If there's one thing we've learned about this, a lot can happen in a day. Nevertheless, 13 days. I would really need to continue to watch the community and to see what happens over the next 13 days before I could really have a more educated idea of what's going on at that time, knowing that there's a meeting on the 4th, that we could have this discussion again. As a result of that, I won't be supporting this.
Mrs. Harris, after our Thanksgiving break, did we see an uptick of positive cases? Do you know, if you don't mind looking?
I'd have to go back and
Okay.
Any other discussion? All in favor, actually, can we do?
Just give me 1 second. So we had an uptick in one building. It was the high school.
And what was that uptick?
So the week prior was 3, and then we went to 9. So
And was that the 9? Was that the following Friday? So they came
Yeah.
back. They came back on Tuesday, and then Friday we were up to 9.
So I have to look at a calendar. Hold on. Because we have these set up Saturday to Saturday. So 1 second. Hold on, I take that back. My columns were condensed. It went from 9 to 12. So the week of 11/27, which was Saturday the 27th, we had, I'll give you all 3 weeks to make it easier. So the week of 11/20, we had 9 cases. The week of 11/20. The week of 11/27, we had 19. And then the week of December 4th, we had 17. I think one of the things that makes this a little bit challenging is the fact that it also just coincides with the incidence rate in the community. So the incidence rate in the community is also high. So it makes it a little hard to be able to connect it to necessarily any decisions that you've made, like not mandating quarantine or sort of removing the making masks optional, because the incidence rate is so high in and of itself. I would kind of anticipate having a higher case count just because of that. So I'm just adding that piece in there because I do think it's challenging for you to kind of look at that data and try to make any sort of, sense out of it that way. I think that's an important factor.
Thank you.
Before we vote, so the motion is to reinstate masks, basically, for that period.
I think technically the motion it should be that the modifying the health and safety plan, that the board is actually approving a revised health and safety plan, which requires January 3rd to January 14th, full masking.
Got it.
Whatever.
Good. Thank you.
Mr. Fike, can we do roll call vote for that?
Dr. Angela Battler? I'm sorry, Dr. Andrea Battler? Can you hear me now? Okay.
No.
John Fiddler?
No.
Dr. Ann Herring?
No.
Dr. David Hemberger?
Yes.
Michael Japina? Jason Mell?
Yes.
Timothy Morgan?
No.
Julia Schaefer?
No.
Allison Wilson?
No.
2 yes, 7 no. Motion fails.
Motion fails.
Dr. Herring, I would, if talking about the health and safety plan, one thing I know we have a lot of people that are saying that we're not following the recommendations of the CDC. And I really would like to see the language in our health and safety plan say that we recommend masks. Just like the CDC says. And the CDC cannot, or they're not mandating masks, but they do recommend them. And I would like to make a motion that we recommend that we wear masks in school.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Just a, quick clarification. So a recommendation is not a binding decision. It's just,
So if this motion were to pass, we would edit the health and safety plan, include that the district recommends the wearing of masks. However, they continue to be optional. And then we would, submit that as our formal health and safety plan.
What does that offer us by changing the language to a recommendation?
We follow the CDC. We're doing what they're saying.
Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No? Any abstentions? Motion carries. There's no more discussion on that. We'll move on to athletics and extracurricular. Mrs. Wilson.
Thank you. I would like to first thank the music department for wonderful holiday concerts at Rifton, the junior high, and the high school. And I believe that the elementary schools are putting together a virtual performance. All winter sports are up and running as of right now. Girls and boys basketball, girls and boys bowling, girls and boys wrestling, girls and boys indoor track, and girls and boys swimming and diving, as well as cheerleading. And speaking of the cheerleaders, they took second place at counties this weekend, and they were the runners-up for District 3. I also would like to share that on January 4th, at our next Committee of the Whole meeting, we will be celebrating our district champion football team and also our county champions, the girls and boys cross-country teams. And also, I would encourage, if you have a chance this week, to stop in at Chick-fil-A to support a fundraiser for National Honor Society, and they are raising money for their gold stoles that they wear at graduation. Thank you. Also, if anybody has anything for athletics and extracurriculars and you would like me to share it, please let me know, and I will be happy to do so. Thank you.
Mrs. Wilson, I had a quick question, if you don't mind. Are gift cards for that included if you tell them gift cards? Because I was going to tell them because yeah, okay. Just want to put that out there too.
Mrs. Wilson, Exeter Community Education Foundation. Any report?
I do not have a report.
Okay.
May I speak to that? Okay, so we had a shop with teacher on last Monday night, and that went really well. So the kids were all excited, the teacher were excited. We had a great time. I did participate in that, so that was wonderful.
How many students and teachers participated?
I believe there was 20 students, and at least a dozen teachers were there. I mean, at least one teacher per student, if not a staff member. Some were paired with two. So there was at least probably 24 teachers there. It was fun. Thanks to Bosco and all the donors.
Thank you. BCTC Joint Operating Committee, Mr. Fiddler.
Nothing beyond what you've already received.
Thank you. BCIU, Dr. Hemberger.
Dr. Herring, the BCIU board meeting for December has been canceled because of the holiday, which normally would be this Thursday. But I'll go on to my legislative report. Okay. Just a couple pieces of legislation from Harrisburg that I wanted to report on. Recently passed by the Senate was a bill that would prohibit COVID-19 vaccine mandates for children. It passed on party lines and would prohibit, it'll prohibit any COVID-19 vaccine mandate for children as a condition of entry to K-12 schools. The bill is now in the House for further consideration, and was noted that currently there is no mandate from the state or any school district to require COVID-19 vaccinations to attend school. The other bill I'd like to report on is House Bill 1332. Some of you may be familiar with this. This is the mandated posting of curriculum. And this requires school entities to make information about their curriculum publicly available online. The bill was recently amended in October by the Senate Education Committee to be more specific in terms of what that would actually include. So what is required by school districts in terms of what's posted would be a course syllabus or written summary, the state academic standards for each instructional course, textbooks, syllabi, course descriptions, academic standards that are used by the school district. The Republican lawmakers that enacted this legislation felt that it was important to move forward with this because they wanted to ensure that the curriculum and lessons plans being taught in the school are in line with educational objectives of parents and their wishes. And the bill's author wrote that parents across communities will be able to easily review these materials and provide feedback to school district officials before the start of the school year. It appears as if Governor Wolf will oppose this bill and is not expected to sign it. And the Democrats who are opposed to this bill say that the bill is an effort to incite division as well as to undermine the authority of school boards, and it really has nothing to do with transparency and more about politics. So those are the two interesting pieces of legislation that we currently have going on in Harrisburg. And I'm not sure where it is in terms, this particular bill is in terms of Governor Wolf signing, but I'm sure we'll see something in the paper in the near future in terms of whether he signs or chooses not to. That's all from my report, Dr. Herring.
Thank you, Dr. Hemberger. Township Bureau Liaison, Mr. Mel.
I plan on meeting with the new board or at least discussing with the new board of supervisors once they come on board. I have nothing to report for this month, though.
Thank you. Public comments. We don't have anyone signed up, but would anyone like to make a public comment? Okay. If there's no public comment, then I'd like it noted that there will be an executive session after this meeting to discuss personnel matters. and the meeting is adjourned.